If we do talk about the doctrines, though, what does Islam mean by God? Because we're often told, again, the Abrahamic faiths all worship the same God, whether you call him Allah, Yahweh, God. We're talking about the same person. Do either Muslims or biblical Christianity teach that we worship the same God, just call him different names?
The problem with Islam and Christianity in this issue of terminology is that we use the same terminology. Muhammad borrowed all his terminology from the scriptures. As such, we tend to confuse, and Muslims tell us something which is not there. So our problem is that although the terminology is same, the definitions and the concepts are radically and dramatically different. You cannot take it at face value. The Allah of Islam is a very, very different person. The God of the Bible, for instance, is a covenant-making God. We believe in covenant theology. He's a covenant-keeping, covenant-sustaining God. In Islam, Allah does not make a covenant. Though the Quran is saturated with the word covenant, that does not mean Allah makes the covenant, because He is not answerable to anybody. He does not answer anybody. The Allah of Islam is not a triune God. And if we were to contrast certain behavior patterns of this Allah, you would immediately see the Allah of Islam has commanded His followers to kill, and the Allah of Islam has enemies. And that is all recorded in the Quran. His enemies are the Jews and the Christians. This Allah has denied the divine sonship of Christ. His death, the substitutionary, vicarious death on the cross of Calvary, His resurrection, none of it is entertained in Islam. So that whole concept is so different, and I think we would have to take it in a morsel bite to understand what Islam means by Allah, who He is and who He is not.
So while some liberal Christians, professing Christians, would say that we don't have to, as Christians, believe that God is Trinity, even though that is what Christianity is, there would be no Muslims who would say that you could be Muslim, or you could even be anything but an apostate, a blasphemer, if you believe in the Trinity.
That's true. The Quran says in Surah 5, verse 72, says, لَقَدْ كَفَرُوا الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ ثَالِثَةٍ ثَلَاثَةٍ. They blasphemed and apostatized, who say that Allah is a three of a third and a trinity. It's an absolute blasphemy. And it is the most heinous sin that you can commit, that Allah will never ever forgive. So to start with that is a most heinous sin. The whole idea of actually that we worship the same God comes from Surah 29, and perhaps I think was verse 45 or 46. You'll find it if people have their Quran, if they turn to it. قُلُوا آمَنَّا بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْنَا وَبِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكُمْ وَإِلَهَنَا وَإِلَهَكُمْ وَاحِدٌ. Say that we believe in the revelation which has come down to us, and in that which came down to you. Our God, our Allah, and your Allah is one, and it is to Him we bow in Islam. But that is the claim in Mecca. That verse is no longer valid. It is what we call abrogated, and it was an assumption on the part of Muhammad. He refuted, rejected the death of Christ, His resurrection, His sonship, and the triune God. Christians and Jews are kafirs, are apostates in Islam. They are not to be taken in as protectors. So they are blasphemers.
In this understanding of Allah, you really have a capricious, arbitrary deity, don't you? And who doesn't enter into covenant. Does He enter into any kind of relations at all with human beings?
The Islamic theology and its creed, which starts with La ilaha illallah, there is no God but Allah. The whole of Islamic theology is negative. Everything about God is Allah is negative. Even the affirmative statements are in negative. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ. There is nothing like unto Him. Whatever you imagine Allah looks like, He doesn't look like it. Al-Ghazali, one of the most famous Islamic divines or scholar, he stated that Allah is unlike anything, expounding and giving an exposition to that Quranic passage, he said, we cannot imagine him. In fact, it is kufr, apostasy, to say that man is created in the image of God. It is kufr. We don't know anything about him. He is simply unknowable, unaccountable. He is supreme in authority, absolute in power, and as a result of his absoluteness in his power, he can make a lie truth, he can make truth lie. He can turn darkness into light and turn light into darkness. So what that means is 600 years after the advent of Christ, he denies it and he said, no, I didn't know anything about it. This is not true. Then he tells Muhammad that the scriptures are falsified, or the scriptures, all of them, the Old Testament, the New Testament, everything in it is pointing only to you. And the Quran says in Surah 61 verse 6 that Jesus, the son of Mary, came to say to the Jews, Ya Bani Israel, inni Rasulullah ilaykum. O children of Israel, I am an apostle of Allah unto you, confirming the law and predicting or giving you glad tidings of a prophet to come after me. His name is Ahmad. This never happened. So the Allah of Islam now is telling lies. Now, it is not the nature of the God of the Bible. It is not the nature of Yahweh to tell a lie. It is not within him. Therefore, they are incompatible. And if we were to just compare, contrast, for instance, the Sermon on the Mount, it becomes evidently clear that these two are very different. Jesus, our blessed Lord, said, you have heard, you shall not kill. And if you call your brother a fool, you are liable for judgment. And he goes on to say, and if I were just paraphrase and tie a few other verses, that you are to love your enemies. You are to pray for those who persecute you and curse you. Is that Islamic? No. Islam declares immediately jihad. It is non-Islamic. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِهِ. Allah loves those who kill for his cause. يَا أَيُّهَا النَّبِي حَرِّضَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ عَلَى الْقِتَالِ. O Apostle of Allah, entice the believers to rise and kill for me. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمَ الْقِتَالِ. It is prescribed unto you. It is prescribed. Just like fasting. Fighting, slaying, killing your enemies is prescribed unto you. Therefore, this killing, hating, you are to hate. And the Islamic doctrine of hate is Quranic. I will read you a passage, and it is part of al-wala and al-bara. The allegiance to Islam, allegiance to Muhammad, allegiance to the Muslim community, and hate and war, treason and treachery towards the non-believers. It is fully an Islamic doctrine. Therefore, loving your enemies is an absolute foreign concept in Islam. It is non-existent.
So when in the history of the church, tragically, Christians, professing Christians, have killed in the name of God, in the name of Jesus Christ, they have been acting contrary to Christ and the Scriptures, while someone who is killing in the name of Allah, a Muslim killing in the name of Allah, is actually carrying out the explicit teachings of the Quran.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What does Islam see as the character or nature of human existence? It sounds like from what you said earlier that creation was not made in integrity. We don't have an originally good creation that is made bad because of our sin, our fall.
Not according to Islam. There is no concept of original sin in Islam. The Quran says man has no value. He simply does not have value. Allah is prepared to destroy whole humanity. He doesn't care. Your sin and my sin does not impact him in any way. Your righteousness does not impact him in any way. There is no righteousness there either. But it doesn't impact him. He remains aloof. He is in the other world and he's going to remain there. Therefore, there is no relationship.
Why then should I obey all of these countless rules?
Well, the rationale of Islam is that its logic is illogical. That Allah has created, and Islam talks about hakimiyat Allah.